Shana James, welcome back.
Thank you. It's so good to be here and surf like we've been talking about, ride the waves
Perfect.
of
Yeah.
vulnerability and life and intimacy and all the things.
Oh yes, 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 yes. Which I think we have a great topic for today, which is it like the chicken or the egg, the cart before the horse, the connection before the action before the connection, something like that?
I just love that you came up with all those immediately. That was fantastic.
My wife calls that wasted brain space.
Really?
Oh yeah. That's where I store like all my movie quotes and just complete nonsense, but yet I can't find my keys. So she
Right.
always is just like, she's like, you can remember like something
All
from a
that shit.
1980s John Cusack movie,
Right. Right.
like verbatim, but you don't know where you put your phone or your keys.
I
And I'm like, yep.
remember this is like when my kid was little. Do you know the book? Was it Dr. Seuss? The big A, little a, what begins with A? Apples, la la la. It was like it went through the whole alphabet, and it was this whole poem on every page. And like one day started quoting it, or just knowing that I knew the whole thing. And I was like, oh my god, I can't remember right where I put my shoes, but I can remember this whole book.
I
It's
just
weird.
want to know, like, if, by the way, if you're a psychologist or a PhD and you know the brain and you're listening to this show, please shoot me an email and just let me know the explanation behind that. Because yes,
Yeah,
I completely and totally understand, like, especially the kids' books. Like, I already know it's on the next page,
yeah,
verbatim. I don't even have to look. Like, I could actually
yeah.
close this book and read the book.
Good
But yet,
chance, right? Yep. Not
but
even
I
have
don't,
to open it.
yeah, but I don't remember my password for such and such, right?
Right.
Which is crazy. But
It's interesting because it's kind of having me think about our topic today and the whole question of, the male brain, body, psyche, female body, brain, psyche, um, and right, like what we actually need to feel connected or to feel sexual or to feel intimacy together. Um, and our brains do, like, there's so many things that we're tracking and managing and holding. And I think that this is a huge part of it, right? Especially before we were parents, we didn't have to track the millions of details that we're tracking right now that are not very sexy.
that is so true. I think about even like college. I thought I was crazy busy in college trying to keep up with our courses, and I had a
Yeah.
job too and that kind of thing. And I'm just like, man, like if that was like the only few things that I had to worry about, like,
Right now? Oh,
right, yeah, it's like what? Like, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so those of you guys in the audience listening, if you are facing the type of things that we're talking about today, which is men want to feel connected, right? And I'm not just talking about sex. That's part of it. And our wives want to feel connected to us, but we have different needs when it comes to how and when those things play out, right?
yeah.
So, Shannon, I would love for you. I would love for you to share just your perspective on this from a woman's point of view.
Yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna say some things I may not have said out loud yet because I'm working with this in my own life and my own world where, I've been a very I don't know if very I've been a sexual woman, right? I love having sex. I love that part of relationship. I coach men a lot without judgment, with very much openness and like, okay, right, whatever your desires are, they are innately good, right? There's nothing bad or wrong that we can want, and respectful ways to go about creating this. But as I'm raising a kid and running a business and navigating a relationship, um, it's an interesting exploration, right? Of like, where does sex come in and how? Who's responsible? Am I responsible for keeping myself turned on and out of that exhausted, ragged mother role? Or is my partner somewhat responsible for that, right? Where's the line of where we're responsible for our own bodies and turn on, and where we are actually co-responsible for each other. So I think this is going to be a great conversation too, where where we look at it in some different ways, because I don't know, is anyone, if you're listening to this, like, have you thought about what is my responsibility for my own body and my own turn on versus my wife or my partner. It's an interesting way to start to think about it. And how do we come together in this? No pun intended. How do we how do we come together in these conversations,
You
right?
couldn't
And
time
be
that
willing to
better.
talk about that.
Oh my God. Like you literally could not have timed that better. That there if there is a pun in 2024, you just nailed it.
I just nailed
Totally.
it. That was good.
Totally. Oh wait, that might be a pun too. Look at
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and just so you guys know, this is a before we hit record today, Shane and I were talking, and we were talking about just some of our own challenges that we've had, and I'm also seeing this a lot in the community, and I've seen this now for almost a decade with just us guys and our marriages and our relationships and our intimacy, which is, we don't, as men, we don't feel connected to our wives, and we want to feel connected to them, not just physically but emotionally too. But so I've had a lot of clients, a lot of guys that we've worked with over the years that they're not having that physical connection in their relationship, and they're like, I just don't know how to do it. I keep pursuing it, but it's just not happening. And I think the wives all the while are probably like, they want to feel connected just like we do, but they are looking for the connection outside the bedroom as well,
Right.
mostly to have that connection inside the bedroom. But it's for a guy though, and I'm just speaking for most men, that's the number one way that we feel and express love is
Yeah.
through sex, right?
Mhm.
And when that is taken off the table and we're not having it in our relationship, we don't feel connected to you.
Right.
We don't feel loved. We actually don't even feel like we're giving love in probably the most powerful way we know how. And we feel like there's something incredibly missing. And to be honest, there's even like, it feels emasculating. It's
Yeah.
like, because then a
Yeah.
dude is like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, why doesn't she want to? What am I doing wrong? And then, but I also think, and I've heard this, that, and I've experienced this in my own relationship too, that when the woman doesn't feel connected to us, there tends to be what we would call nagging,
Yeah.
but it's more or less like, hey, I really want to feel connected to you, but this is kind of like my way of trying to get your attention, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
a guy doesn't receive it that way, right? They
Right.
receive it as like, I'm just doing more things wrong, right?
Totally. Totally.
So do you see that battle as well?
I do, and so many things that you're saying, have me really look at the background or the foundation, right, of immature versus mature honesty or communication. And, I think a lot of men I work with don't necessarily realize that the way you communicate, the way partners communicate, either creates, maybe this is obvious, creates more turn on or takes it away, right? But so from the outside of the bedroom, if we're thinking about, okay, a woman's nagging, if she's not in a place of knowing how to communicate responsibly or in a mature way, then I think that's the first thing that needs to be addressed. But because and if a man is responding in the kind of normal cultural way, he'll get defensive, he'll shut down, he'll be like, "Ugh, why are you nagging me? This is annoying." I know what you teach men, right, is to actually have these deeper conversations and to have more of a sense of, hey, what's really going on here? And this way of you talking to me isn't working. It's not, I know it seems like you're trying to get something here, but it's not quite working for me. And I don't think it's working for you either. It doesn't seem like you're happy, right? So we can talk about the action versus connection, but I don't want to leave out that part also in the background, which is, how are we communicating with each other? Are we actually doing it in a way that creates more of that kind of connection and likelihood to have sex? Or are we cutting ourselves off at the knees with the words we use and the tone we use?
Which I think if we're really frustrated, physically, sexually, emotionally, and we're not connected, then we're more likely to have like those knee jerk reactions when we're even having a
Totally.
conversation. It's
Yeah.
almost like And I was telling you this before we hit record, like my wife and I, I mean, I would say like on a scale of 1 to 10, our marriage, it's like it always revolves around like an 8.59, you know. Sometimes it feels like a 10. And we don't really falter in those. We go through like these blips, right? Of like,
Yeah.
you know what? Today in the past 3 days, it feels like a 4,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But 10 years ago, it felt like a 4 all the time.
Yeah.
And but like, so, we've been in the past week as you and I are recording, we've been kind of in this, I would say this stressful season where there's just been a lot of things coming at us, right?
Yeah.
Some good and some not so good. A lot of things happening like with our kids and their circle of friends and their and school and like all the just a lot of crazy stuff. And and I've been probably more short and less connected to her because I
Yeah.
feel more stressed. She feels that she has more pressure in her life because of all the things that are going on within our
Yep.
family. And
Yep.
we're both like, we call it spinning in different orbits. And like, so I was joking with you, it was a serious story. So we were out to lunch last week and it had been a while since we had talked like deeply. And I told her, I was like, I really miss you. Like, and that basically means I really want to have sex with you. And that's our code phrase for that. And she smiled and she's like, you need to woo me a little bit. And I'm like, I know. I'm fully aware. And I even told her, I was like, I was like, for guys to feel connection, we need action first and then we feel connected. I was like, but I also know for you women, I was like, you got to feel connected first and then the action. And she's like, that is absolutely true. But
Yeah.
here's the cool thing, is that we a conversation like that 10 years ago would have never happened. In fact, if she would have been like, well, you need to woo me first, like that would have pissed me off.
Right. Right.
Like
And you would have
I would
shut
have gotten
down and got
defensive. Yeah.
defensive. Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
which I think that's a common thing. So maybe we can talk about that, like about
Yeah.
how there's just these misunderstandings that happen.
Yes. Right. And do you have a sense of what would have made you feel defensive about that? Again, maybe this is obvious, but I think it's
Oh yeah,
helpful.
yeah, for sure. And by the way, I love being your guinea pig. Yeah. So I would have probably been like, well, I've been trying. Or
Right.
something like I would have done that. I've probably been like, so like my efforts to connect with you haven't been working or they've been falling on deaf ears. So I would have gotten kind of like pissed. Or I would have been
Yes.
like, well, I tried to talk to you yesterday about this or that. And then I would try to like prove that I was trying to like connect with her.
Yes.
But yeah, I would have gotten defensive.
Okay. So 'cause the question that just came up for me that can be a good one for couples is like, what do we need? Right?
Mhm.
What do we need right now? What do we need to have you feel good and to have me feel good? And when I hear you say that in the way that you would have taken it back then, it was more of a me against you, right? Or not quite on the same team. Even if there's a lot of things you do well together, it's more of a, well, I did this and you did that, and right, there's more like a win-lose dynamic as opposed
Yes.
to oh, we seem really frustrated with each other. We seem like we're in a rut. We seem um, like we're wanting different things or we're wanting the same thing, but we're not quite sure how to get there together. And I think the more you the more you're able to contain that experience of I want to defend right now, but I'm not going to, or God, there's something I really want. And I want to blame the other person. I want to blame my wife for it, but okay, I'm not going to. The more we have a chance to have some of those deeper conversations. But like you said, it's not easy.
It's not. But I think that there's like, I think about our relationship a while ago, a long time ago. And well, how I wouldn't have known how to even get out of that or even to like to zoom out from it
Yes.
and just call it more of a we thing versus like
Mm.
because I would have just taken a comment like that personally, but I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
But I would
Which is
have, and I
huge. I don't want you to, like, just pass over that and, I mean, that takes something to let go of taking things personally because
Mhm.
it does, it stings, it feels like getting, shot by arrows or bullets.
Yeah, it does, especially when you feel disconnected or things aren't just
Right.
happening. You just you almost feel more agitated,
Yeah,
or more defensive.
yeah,
But how do we first of all, how do we even I don't want to talk about prevention because I think we talk about prevention a
yeah,
lot on the show,
yeah,
like all the great things you can do to create an extraordinary marriage. But I think when you do fall into that rut or that situation where time has passed now, needs are not being met on both sides,
Yeah.
and connection feels it doesn't feel good anymore. It feels a bit lost. And now we need to recover, but we want both parties to be more on the offense and not the
Yeah.
defense. And
Yeah.
let's not also take away from the fact that there's a part of us that don't even want to go have this conversation.
Totally.
We're
Right.
just kind of like hoping it'll fizzle away and we'll
Yeah.
start to connect again. But having that conversation can be kind of scary.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about in my book where I wrote one of the, I can't remember, I think it's a heading of a chapter. It's not a full chapter, but it's you're not who you think you are, and neither is your partner. And this idea that, if you know internal family systems, or there are a bunch of different ways that people talk about this, but that we have different parts or different selves. And one of my selves, is bitchy and naggy and complainy. And I can hear that voice in my head sometimes. And I have another self that's like, okay, what is going to be the most effective way to create connection? Or, another self that's maybe just much more like lovey dovey and appreciative and, generous. And so some of this, I think, is about which self we're actually choosing to drive the bus. And not, it took me a while to learn, oh, I don't actually have to give voice to that self all the time. Just because it's there doesn't mean I need to say this. And then, meditation and the capacity to witness my thoughts and witness that self has really helped me to slow down and be like, okay, that one's there, this one's here. Which one am I going to speak from that's actually going to create what I want? And after my divorce almost 12 years ago now, um, I made a commitment to myself that as much as I could, I was not going to open my mouth until what I said would create connection with my future partners. Because I had that sense of like, oh man, every time I do that, every time I speak in a way that's defensive or arrogant or all of those things, it's just breaking trust and it's creating a downward spiral that then we're stuck in. So, as I think about, okay, how do we together get back to connection? I think about a simple game that I learned a long time ago called Yes and. And have you done that with your people?
No, but
Okay. No,
suddenly
but
I'm so no, but I'm very curious what this is. Yes, and
yeah.
okay, go ahead.
So yes, and the stance of it is that everybody is right to some degree, right? Nobody can be fully wrong. And so therefore, if anybody has an idea or anybody's done something, like we really look at the what do we appreciate about that, and what what comes next? What do we want? What does that bring up for us? So if you were to say to me, I really miss having sex, I might say, yes. And, I actually would love that too. And there's some part of me that's feeling kind of stressed and I don't really know how to get out of it, but, I want that. And what it makes me think of is like, how can I get less stressed this weekend? Or how can I, open to that way of connecting with you? So, there's a kind of we can look at how to play it, but the ultimate idea is instead of you saying I'd love to have more sex and me being like, yeah, but I'm too tired, yeah, but the kids are going through this thing, yeah, the but, or the no but, or like you always say that, or I'm tired of this, and I don't it feels like you're pulling for something. It's the willingness to A, be vulnerable, and B, come from a possibility consciousness, or a yes, we can actually make this happen, right? We both get to have what we want and we don't have to go into scarcity or that win-lose dynamic.
I think that's a dynamic I would love to avoid at all costs because and I think a lot of guys listening to the show want that too.
Yeah.
But when we go to have conversations, and I think this is just a human thing,
Yeah.
is that we think that every conversation that we have around, hey, like I have these wants or desires, requests,
Yeah.
whatever, it doesn't really matter. Um, it's got to be a win lose. Like I get what I want, but you don't,
Yeah.
or you get what you want and I don't. So it's
Yeah.
like, but it can absolutely be the win win. I think
Yeah.
we just need to approach it in such a way.
Yeah, right. If we believe that it can be, then we start looking for how can this be a win-win, right? And one of my I don't think we actually worked together, but there was a guy, oh, we did one session together. There was a guy who read my book and he came back and he said, "Oh my God, I've never had conversations like this with my wife." And we're starting to have these conversations, and now we're actually starting to be more connected, and I'm starting to tell her some of the things I want in my sex life that I never thought I could say out loud, and she's telling me things. And so granted, there was an openness to their communication. They were both hearing each other, and they weren't in a place of on the opposite team, or that's disgusting, or they weren't shaming, blaming, attacking each other. So apparently they already had this foundation. Um, as we talked, and he was saying, well, she wants this and I want this, which is exactly what you're saying. I was like, well, okay. So what if you schedule one time a week for this kind of emotional connection, or, hey, these are the things that need to get handled and these are the things that are stressing me out. It could be logistics, but it's also coming from more of an emotional place, right? I want to feel connected to you in this way emotionally. And then one time a week where you schedule something that is sexy. Um, and I'm not saying sex specifically, but we could call it sex, but a broader definition of sex, which is like, and this will be interesting because I'm curious your take on this as a man, but I think for me as a woman, if a man is willing to start with, oh, um, let's massage each other, let's breathe together, let's have energetic or a tantric experience, which we can talk about if that doesn't, if that's not familiar. Um, let's do things that actually feel sensual, like have an amazing meal together, right? For me, if a man is willing to start with some of those things, it helps me actually get into the mood and into
Mhm.
that state that I need to be in. So, right, one time a week where we're focusing on what would have us be emotionally connected, one time a week focusing on what would have us sexually be connected. And for some couples, one time a week is going to be too much. So maybe it's, we every other week or even once a month to do each of those things. So that way each person knows, okay, my time is coming. If this is what I need and we're doing this one, I'm also going to get this one. It's not that I'm having this one and so the other one has to go away. And then
Interesting.
they actually decided at one point that they were going to do them both together. They were like, we're going to do this one first, and then we're going to. So I'm not saying there's a prescription; it has to go a certain way, but as a foundation, right? What is it like if we have that? Yes, and we get to do both.
So each person basically says, "This is what I would like," and the other person's like, "Okay, well then we'll do that,"
Yeah,
and then okay, it takes okay, yeah.
I mean that,
I
right? And yeah,
I don't think a lot of couples are like that though. I think that they're. Do
no,
you find that most couples are more into like the short game versus the long game? It's like, okay, when's the next time we're gonna have sex, not the next several months of sex
yes,
gonna look like?
yeah, and that there's this. I think because most of us aren't taught that it takes something to keep a sex life alive over decades. That it's more just like, oh, we're having it or we're not. And if we're not, we're grumpy about it. And if we are, great. And if we're not, like you said, like, hopefully this will pass. But there aren't those. That's why I keep going to the background of the mature conversations, right? Because hey, if we have never had a conversation about what an amazing and extremely alive and satisfying sex life would be for each of us, there's a lot we've left on the table, right? No judgment, no blame, no shame. But to me, what that means is it's like a hope and pray that things are going to get better, as opposed to, I know what you want, you know what I want. Let's actually try to make these things happen for each other, with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think a lot of people just avoid talking about it altogether.
I agree.
So let's talk about how men can lead a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And I think that this is really important, that the approach has to be right.
Mhm.
So, like, for instance, I remember I remember back in the early days, and this is, like I said, we were both spinning in different orbits all the time, and
Yeah.
no needs were being met on either side. And it was always a defensive. Like, I'm not proud of this, but I would actually go in and be like, why aren't we having sex lately?
Mhm.
Like, is there something wrong? And that never started things off well. And I don't even know why I
Doesn't.
thought it would. Like, you know what I mean? And
Well, you
so
probably weren't
now,
even thinking that it would, it was just more like, "Ugh, this is the frustration," right? That's
yeah,
the
it
thing coming
was
up.
100%. And now what I've noticed, and even as I say this out loud, I I've been doing this intentionally, and I find that it works really well for a connected conversation.
Yeah.
Let me say this too. I don't have these conversations from a manipulative standpoint or trying to woo her. It's more or less like, this is what's actually really happening, right?
Yeah.
And so
Curiosity, right?
curiosity, yeah.
Exploration, like, "Okay, let's discover what's happening here."
But I've also found that, and I cannot remember who taught me this, because I think it was actually more of a parenting podcast
Mhm.
where, because parents, we're obviously not perfect. And if we're trying to address something with our kid, one of the most powerful things we can do is start a conversation by owning our part in the situation.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, but I took that into our marriage, and I've noticed that conversations are tremendously better. So, like, if I go to, like, this just happened like a week ago, I went to Jess and I was like, hey, I was like, I know we've been disconnected lately, and I know I have not talked nearly as much. I know that I've been more stressed out, cold, and distant lately because of everything we've got going. Like, I'm in the
Yep.
process of launching a book, and I feel like it's crazy right now. A lot of the things are going on. I was just like, I've really, I take full ownership in my part in this, which is I've been a very disconnected partner, and
Yeah.
I haven't talked to you the way I usually do. And I probably haven't even been curious about you and asked you about, like, your day and your week and all this other stuff. It's just like I've been in my own head.
Yeah.
And I know that that has tremendously not helped our situation whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then what I find
Amazing.
is, what I find when she receives that is, she's like, number one, she'll agree with me, but number 2, she'll be like, "Yeah, and oh, look at that. Look what I said." She's like, "Yeah, and here's my part to play in this, and I know I've been doing this, this, and this, and I haven't been
Right.
this greatest partner to you either." But that's what I find, is that is such a different conversation, because just simply by the way we started it versus,
Yeah.
like, coming in guns blazing, like, "What's going on with us?"
What and it's like you turned it
You.
from a you conversation to an I. "Hey, I
Yeah.
know I've been doing this," and right, and whether it's an apology or I get it and I wanna change or, I wanna do something different. It's anytime we're going you, our partners are just like, "Ah," right? We wanna defend against that.
We
So,
do.
yeah, that's amazing. That's an amazingly mature conversation and connected conversation to go in and be able to say, "I see this." And I think that can be really helpful for people to for someone else to know like, "Oh, thank God. I'm not just alone in this," right?
Yeah, yeah. What have you found, though, as far as how men can lead a conversation like that, but also, because we don't know what's going to come at their direction,
Yes, yes,
and even though we're like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to own my part in this, I'm going to be curious, I'm going to listen. At the same time, like, this conversation might not turn out great. So
totally.
how do we, even as a couple, have a more fulfilling conversation? I know you gave us kind of like the, yes and,
Mhm.
but if the conversation starts to go, like, in the weeds, right? And it
Yep.
starts to get a little hairy, like, how can we pull back to, like, hey, this is us, like, let's regroup here.
Yeah. Well, I think even saying something like that, right? If you want to lead and you notice that a dynamic is starting to go into the weeds, even just naming that, like, I think we're in the weeds here, right? Or I can see that we're both getting riled up about this. We're both getting frustrated. So I propose we take 10 minutes apart and we each go sit and we take a walk around the block, or we meditate, or we read a quote that inspires us, or, that the leadership, in some ways, you don't have to always know what to do. You just have to be able to notice when things are going awry, right? Or notice, oh, that idea seemed to really light both of us up. Like, let's put more attention there.
Hmm.
So being able to feel and experience where the energy is uplifted, where there's connection versus where there's disconnection, is really, really helpful. And then again, this is why I kind of keep referring to this background of communication, because, okay, so if we as a couple, and most couples don't have this, and it could be written or it could be verbal, but if we don't have an agreement about how we're going to communicate with each other, the likelihood is it's going to go into the weeds a lot, because
Mm.
we're going to bring blame, we're going to bring shame, we're going to bring how could yous,
What's wrong with you?
versus what's wrong with you, right? Versus, and God, I hear my mom say that to my dad, like, what is wrong with you? And I'm just like, oh, it's so painful. Um, versus like, hey, this is another one of the communication tools that changed my life, was assuming the best and getting curious instead of assuming the worst, right? So assuming what's wrong with you is an assuming the worst. Like, I cannot believe you did that. You must have intended to do, right? You're trying to make my life miserable. Versus assuming the best is coming from a place of, hey, I think I know you well enough to know that you actually love and care about me. That action really seemed to miss the mark. Can you help me understand what happened? Right? Can you and it takes something, I think, to be able to tolerate in ourselves the discomfort of something bad happened. I don't like it. It has to do with my partner. And then I want to get curious versus, like you said before, then I want to just lay out my frustration. It takes something to be able to do that within ourselves. But I do think if we can create a sense of, hey, how do we want to have conversations? Do we want to have curious, connected conversations, or do we want to have conversations where we're bitching at each other and blaming each other? And that does not create a sexy relationship.
It does not. In fact, it even when you have that kind of tension, you know, even if you get to the physical stuff, it's like that wasn't as awesome
Wasn't
as
so
it could have
good.
been.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Yeah. Wasn't so good. Didn't, right?
Yeah,
Like, it didn't, it's not what we're all looking for, I think, or what
right.
we're wanting.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you this from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
Um, what is it? What would you say is needed most
Hmm.
in order just for us to feel connected? For a woman, I'm just going to ask you this: what does a woman need most to be like, oh my god, I freaking want you?
Yeah.
How
Okay.
about
This is
that?
a fun question.
Yeah,
I feel so grateful for my partner. We've been together for about a year and a half or two at this point, and we're hitting some of that, like, the honeymoon phase is ending, and there's some real shit, real not real shit, but real dynamics happening, right? And he's an incredible human being, and I would say he wins so often at this because um I think what I need to open and to feel turned on and to feel like, wow, I really want you. Um on the one hand, I need from him to really be, how do we want to say this? Like, to know and love and appreciate and respect himself, right? So he's not coming to me when he's had moments of coming to me with, like, sort of apologetic, like, is it okay that I want sex, or is it okay that, and I'm just like, okay, I have compassion for that, but I will say it's not the thing that turns me on. So, when you as a man can come from a place of, yes, I'm good, my desires are good, I want amazing things here, I see amazing possibilities here, right? That as a foundation is very sexy to me and to most women I know. And then to be able to see and feel me, right? And so I know you've talked about, I think maybe we've talked about this on a podcast or on a class, like the tendency to try to fix things, or to try to make things go away or solve things with your mind versus like, hey, I'm here with you. I'm just listening. I got you. I love you. That sense of I'm with you emotionally is also another foundation. And I would say to go above and beyond is a way of actually really being able to see and feel deeply into her heart. Like, not just, hey, I'm listening and I'm not trying to fix, but you know what I really see about you is that you're holding, like you were saying, your wife is navigating things with kids at school. It's like you're holding every single one of these kids in your heart. And, you know, that, like, I don't even know how that's even possible, but you're doing it and it blows me away and it has me love you and respect you even more. And I think you're amazing, right? There's like okay, so we've got the foundation of knowing, loving, respecting yourself, and then being able to be connected emotionally, and then being able to see even deeper. And then coming from that place of positivity and excitement and inspiration, not like, oh, fuck, I've got to woo her. Like, shit, what am I going to do? But more like, oh, okay, how am I
Yeah.
going to create something fun and interesting and sexy and creative? And I know that when you have a partner who isn't really um, willing to play or willing to, get excited, it's a hard road, I will say, right? It's like walking up a
Yeah.
big steep hill. And so that's why we talk about the mature communication and the, understanding how we're impacting each other. As you start to create that dynamic, then it's like, I can see that you're really stressed this week, so I'm going to run you a bath and I'm going to open a bottle of wine or make coffee or whatever. I want you to just relax for a few minutes and then, like, let's talk about what would actually feel great to both of us tonight.
Mhm. Yeah.
What are you wanting or needing? What am I wanting or needing? How do we actually create this together? It's like a co-creative thing, with the leadership being the
Mhm.
one who gets to, like, in this case, right, the man who gets to say, this is what I want. This is what I think you want, but let's actually look at this together.
Just to even simplify this a little bit, like,
Yeah.
yeah, not many guys know Jessica, right? And they might be like, man, like she sounds tough. Like, she's telling you she needs to be wooed. I've known Jess for as long enough now to know that she's like, I just want us to talk.
Uh-huh.
I just want to go out, have a cup of coffee or have a nice lunch with you and literally just talk to you. Like that
Right.
is actually
You know that about her. You've
I do.
learned that
Yeah.
about her, which
I
is
mean, like,
beautiful.
yeah, and like that, but like I think men like I love all your suggestions and I think that they're very valid. 'Cause I think when we do things like that are unexpected and we do things that, might surprise them and without the agenda though. It's like I'm
Right.
doing these things because I care about you. Or
Yeah.
I'm doing these things because I love you, period. Right.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be
And
that you run a bath or make dinner or anything. Like you said, if you
mhm,
know that your wife just wants to feel heard or just wants to, like, have that FaceTime with you, right? The wooing isn't about creating some kind of crazy thing. It's just about meeting her where she wants to be met.
yeah. Well, I know for just a lot of married couples out there. Like, so I look at our relationship and, I it really it doesn't at this point because and by the way, I keep saying this, but things have not always been good or easy. Like it took a crap ton of work on both
Yeah.
of our parts to get where we're at. But the thing that I love about our relationship when we do have like these really great date days and stuff like that is that we get to have conversations and it feels like nobody else is even around.
Yeah.
Like that's the coolest thing. But I think some couples out there have been maybe in a rut. It might be a week, it might be a season, it might be years
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
haven't connected like that. They haven't felt that way in so long, up to the point where like so I had this one client a long time ago, and this is the other extreme, and this is what I'm talking about. is he hadn't had sex with his wife in like a year and a half.
Yep.
And he was talking to me about it. He's also a good friend. He was a client, was, and is now a good friend. And we
Yeah.
talk all the time. And I remember him coming to me after he wasn't my client anymore. We still talked all the time. We were friends. And he would just be like, we haven't had sex in a year and a half. And I'm like, dude, just go ravage her. Like, just go ravage her. He's like, you don't understand. I was like, what do I not understand? He's like, at this point,
Yeah.
that would feel just weird. He's
Yeah.
like, even talking about it feels weird. And I was like, what's weird about it? And he's just like, because again, like, I didn't really understand that. And then I really, really, really thought about it. And I was like, man, like, if you are literally in this situation
Yeah.
where you haven't connected with your wife, you haven't had sex in a year and a half, you haven't even talked about it. In fact, you probably just feel like your brother and sister are friends at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like, how do we get, I can truly understand why people are just like, well, it's probably just easier if we break up. Cause like,
Yeah.
even
Just not to do this.
just not to do this. So how, like those type, like, so that situation,
Yeah.
how do we help those
Well, and
people?
one of the things that my partner has said to me, because he's been in relationships where they didn't talk about things, they went on for a long, and he was like, the thing that I love about us, Shana, is that I know that we're going to talk about everything. So therefore, I don't have the fear that it's going to become one of those situations, right? Where it's been a year, it's been all, all that time. But if you are in that situation because you haven't had that agreement, right, that you're going to talk about anything and everything, then I think, even that simple the leadership of coming to your wife and that simple way of saying, I care about you. I want you to be happy. What do you need? Right? What do you need? What do we need? How can we be happy together? How can we feel excited about each other again? Right? It's not and that's why, again, I always go back to this background of these honest, mature conversations and to your own self-respect and sovereignty, because the words themselves are easy. It's how we feel about ourselves and whether we are allowing ourselves to ask certain questions or to stay curious or to tolerate some of that discomfort, and whether we think we're good enough or we deserve it or all those things. Once that is, once we were more solid in that, it's a lot easier to have those conversations. But for most of us, we didn't learn that growing up. So it takes, like you said, you've both done a crap ton of work. I've done a crap ton of work. My partner, right? It takes that sense of knowing ourselves and understanding our triggers. But it also can be as simple as, I care about you and I want you to be happy. And what do you think it would take? Or
Yeah.
can we brainstorm this together?
I have one more question to build on everything you just said,
Okay.
which is all about the work. And because I know you got a hard stop here in a few minutes, but I think this might be a good spot to end, which is,
Yeah.
and I used to think this and I don't anymore. And now, like, when I hear this from other, like, I would say younger couples, I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, no, no, no. And here it is, right? Well, if we have to work at it, are we meant to be together? Should love really be this hard? So you hear that one all the time too. Like,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on that? I think I know what you're going to say, but still.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a difference between love and partnership, right?
Yeah.
Love
Well said.
and love as a feeling and love as an act, right? I mean, when we're in a state of love, it's easy. But life happens and kids happen and shit happens and the world is falling apart and there's stress and there's all these things. So, when I think about it, takes something even for me as an individual to stay well, mentally healthy and well. So, you add another person to the mix, it's going to take something for the relationship dynamic to be healthy and well. And I think you can see relationship as a spiritual practice or a growth practice, right? If you start to look at it as, um, maybe it shouldn't be. Nobody should be abused, and nobody should be attacked, and nobody should be, disrespected. But beyond that, it's like it's going to take some grit and it's going to take some work. Everything else in our lives do. So yeah, I think it's normal And if we see it as, oh my God, this is an opportunity for me to grow and for me to be stronger and clearer and love better and be more alive. And if my partner's willing to do that with me, then hell yeah, that's an amazing relationship.
I love that. I love that. Shana, where can the guys find you if they want to connect with you? I know you got a book out called Honest Sex. My dog's going crazy because somebody's at my door right now. So I apologize for the background. So I'm going to mute myself while you do that.
All right. I think your dog just got excited because you said honest sex. So it was like, yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, he is neutered, but I'm sure he still has feelings and urges.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you can find me at my website, shanajamescoaching.com. My podcast is Man Alive. You can look for Larry's episodes. We should do another one for your book, by the way, if you want to do that. I would love to do that. Yeah. Yeah. And, reach out if you are struggling, especially in your relationship with your wife, or, some of you might be divorced and dating again. I love the work that you're doing with Larry. It's incredibly important. And it can also be really helpful to have someone who is of the female gender to be like, yeah, this is what's going on for me, or this is why I'm seeing it this way, or this is why it hurts when you say it that way, right? I do a lot of human practice with men. And not because I'm telling you how to be, but because I'm sharing, the impact that your way of being can have, or your words can have, so that you can have the impact you want to have.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing and providing clarity. Like I've said this before, I'll say it again. I wish I would have met you when I was in the weeds with my marriage and just couldn't I didn't know which way to go, what to do, how to have conversations. And I think if I was a client of yours, if we were friends, I would have had some resources. I would have had some lessons to move our relationship forward, and I didn't at the time. So thanks for the work you're doing. You're really helping people out.
Thank you. And thank you for everything that it took for you, right? Without knowing where to go or having those resources to not only turn it around, but then offer that to all of these men. And, I've talked to a bunch of men who have worked with you, and they're just so, so grateful. And so thank you for being the inspiration and the guide, and for being vulnerable about it too. That is hugely important.
Well, I can't ever run for public office because all my dirty laundry's out there. So everybody knows everything, I think, about me. Gents, you can go to thedadedge.com/Friday162 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday162 for this show. We will have all of Shana's contact in our website in there, her links and all that good stuff. You want to connect with her, highly encourage you to do it. Obviously, she's a very kind person, wonderful person, and a knowledge expert when it comes to this. So thank you for coming on again. It was awesome. You bet.
Yeah. I just had one more thought, which is, if you go to my website, shanajamescoaching.com/3 ways, the number 3 ways, talks about the 3 ways men lose influence with women and at work. And that's a good resource for getting a sense of, right, like, what are those underlying things that are happening that we don't really usually see? It's kind of, I call them the invisible influences, the things that are under the surface. So that's a good way to get a sense of my work also.
Well, we will absolutely have that link in there for you. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to go check that out myself.
Check it out. Awesome.
So yeah, thank you for that.
All right. Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Okay.